This episode of Blowing Smoke with Twisted Rico is brought to you by Baby Loves Tacos and their two outstanding locations in the Pittsburgh area. The original hotspot in Bloomfield and their second location in Millville, right over the 40th Street Bridge. Baby Loves Tacos, where everybody eats. Before we bring out our guest and our great friend, Mickey Bliss, let's listen to Mickey's 1982 single, Cocktails for Two. Welcome to Blowing Smoke with Twisted Rico. I'm your host, Steve Ricardo. You just heard Cocktails for Two. Now let's welcome to the show the one, the only, Mickey Bliss. How are you, Mickey?
Oh, I'm doing fine, Steve. I'm doing fine.
It's good to have you in the studio. I'm usually all alone here, except for a few occasions. But so listen, so it's safe to say that a lot of people know you more as someone they would call to get a gig from than they don't because you spent like 26 years, I believe, booking the Kirkland Cafe and then Club Bohemia. And they probably know you more as a booking agent than they know you as a performer. But you've been a performer most of your life, because I remember when I got the first copy of Cocktails for Two when I was the music director at WDJM in the Boston suburb of Framingham, Mass., and the track was in heavy airplay for some time. That song seems to have aged well over the years. How do you feel about that? It pretty much has, right?
Oh, yeah, I think it's more popular now than it was back in 1982, as far as I can tell.
Did you, I know that it's on YouTube and there's other places you can find it on the internet. Have you gotten any response from the internet on the song?
Well, I'm not online, so I don't know. But I could tell you a story. Like, I used to have copies in the Cantab with me, and people used to buy them. And one guy came in and bought 3 copies for me, and he says, "Yeah, I heard that in a record store. They were playing it, and I tried to buy it in the record store, and they wouldn't sell it to me. They said it's their only copy, and they wanted to keep it." So
cool.
That's the kind of feedback I get. But what they're saying online, I don't know. I didn't put anything up online myself, but people have put it up in Germany and places like that. And people.
Well, you can find the song. We found it. Before we talk about more music-related topics, and there's a lot to talk about, I have to ask you, how has the last year been for you with all this chaos going on, both here in America and all over the world? I mean, how have you been dealing with that? Because it's almost a year now since the pandemic became public knowledge.
Well, the way I've been dealing with it is easy. I mean, that's a complex question about, what you asked. But as far as just specifically the way I've been dealing it, I just basically play music and study. So I play about 2 or 3 hours on the guitar and play 2 or 3 hours on the trumpet. And then I, try and read, some pretty good books like on philosophy or science, anthropology, things like that, history.
So you're keeping yourself pretty occupied.
Yeah, that, and I walk the dog, and, I cook and that type of thing. So, yeah, the day goes right by. I don't have enough hours to do what I'm trying to do.
Do you literally play guitar and trumpet every day?
Oh, yeah, just about, yeah.
Do you still have that organ?
Well, I gave the organ that I used to have at the Cantab and at Kirkland to my son. He's got it as rehearsal space.
Oh, okay.
But I have what's basically a B3 in my porch. They actually call it an A100. It's like a home model of the B3. The difference is it doesn't have a Leslie speaker. The speaker's in a console. But I don't play, since I stopped playing at the Kirkland, I hardly ever play keyboards.
I was going to ask you, actually, switching gears here. When did was the organ the first thing you started playing, and when exactly did you start playing and performing? How long ago was that? Because 82 is when I got your single.
Well, you could say I started performing in 3rd grade or so, because I used to play trumpet. Then they taught me how to play trumpet at school, and I played the school band a little bit. And then after that, once the Beatles came out, I got into guitar and took a few guitar lessons, and then I actually went to Berkeley and studied guitar formally.
Did?
Yeah. But I kind of gave up on guitar for a while because there were so many guitar players. I switched to bass because it was easier to get a gig playing bass. And then I went in the studio one time and had a Hammond organ, and I played it. Well, let me backtrack. I used to run Jack's Drum Shop, too. So I used to play a little bit of drums, and at that time, down in the combat zone, there were probably like 30 clubs that had bands playing all day and night. So all the organ players used to come, if they needed a drummer, and come to Jack's Drum Shop and get me to come play drums for them. So
come on, I never knew you were a drummer. Oh my! Well, so you can play anything.
But I wasn't really a good drummer. All I could play was a backbeat. I could keep time. I couldn't do rolls or anything. But I could keep time for them, and that's what they wanted. They'd give me cheap money because I'd probably get like $50 for the drummer, and they'd give me $5 to play.
For people that don't know Boston, the combat zone, I'm thinking around that time was not a very safe place. It was pretty dangerous, wasn't it?
It could be if you were foolish. There used to be a lot of girls that would pretend like they were hookers and they'd pickpocket people. But
that's lovely.
If you didn't talk to them or anything, it was no danger. I mean, if you minded your own business and just went through there, it wasn't really too dangerous. But
so you didn't feel ever threatened when you were in that area. Wow.
No. But I could tell you a story if you got time for a war story. So there used to be this girl that was a dancer, and she broke up with a boyfriend. So they were worried about him doing something to her, so they used to have us walk her to her car. And I didn't think anything about that. I used to walk her to her car every night to make sure she was safe. Wouldn't you know that when she was at home, she was jogging or something, the guy jumped out of the bushes and killed her.
What?
Yeah.
Wow.
She was a real nice girl, too, Lorraine. She was studying to be a doctor. She was working her way through medical school by dancing down the combat zone.
When you say dancing, you mean a strip bar.
Well, we used to call them exotic dances. But
yes.
Because the reason I say that is because back in those days, it was a real art. The girls used to pay thousands of dollars for their uniforms, and no, not the uniforms, their costumes. And they used to really, study dancing and put on a show. I
It
mean,
was more artistic.
exactly. And in fact, before my time, they used to actually have charts written out that they'd give to the bands so that, when they did shook their body a certain way, the drummer would do a roll and all that type of thing. So, it was, and they had lights and, it was really, a spectacular show, a real production.
So when you say you ran Jack's, I didn't know that. That's a really popular drum shop in Boston. It's long gone now?
Well, it's gone from Boston. Last time I was down in Hyannis, which I think was 2019, it was still down in Hyannis.
Wow.
And, the same guy that ran it in Boston after I took over was still down there. We had a nice conversation. Incidentally, by the way, he's also a Hammond organ player.
I remember when I, was out in California and New York and working for labels, and there were a lot of Boston bands that I worked with, and Jack's Drum Shop ended up getting thanked on a lot of records. So that's how I heard about Jack's, and I remember seeing the shirts. I think Mike Quaglia from the Hoods might have had a Jack's Drum Shop shirt, or they thanked the shop or something. So when you were like around that time, did you, besides filling in with those bands on drums, when did you actually start playing out?
Well, I started playing out in high school, high school dances and parties and things like that.
Where'd you go to high school, if you don't mind me asking?
Well, I went to 3 different high schools. I started out Boston College High School, which I didn't really like because I was commuting all the way from Plymouth to Boston. So,
oh, you grew up in Plymouth?
Yes.
Wow.
So that was kind of a tough commute.
Yeah.
And then, so I went back to Sacred Heart High School in Kingston, but by the time I was a junior in high school, I couldn't take the Catholic school anymore. So my parents let me go to public school for my last year. I graduated from Plymouth Carver High School. But I have to tell you, the difference between the public school and the Catholic schools as far as education, it was like, the difference between kindergarten and college. I mean, the Catholic schools were just such a superior education to the public school.
I was lucky. I was raised as a Catholic, but they didn't send me to Catholic school. I got to take the easy route and go to public school, which I preferred. I have a lot of cousins, though, that went to Catholic schools, and they had really small classes, what I remember. So I can understand what you're saying. You were getting a fantastic education. So you played high school dances and things like that. When did you actually start playing the club scene? And do you remember the places that you used to play?
Let me think. There was some places down in Plymouth we played on the beach. I know my first place I remember playing in Boston, the club was the Novelty Lounge, which was also in the Combat Zone.
You got me stumped with that one. I never heard of that place.
Well,
wow.
It's now a Chinese restaurant on Beach Street.
Of course it is.
But Joe Cook, little Joe Cook used to book it. Joe Cook had a booking agency called Tip Top Productions, and he booked it.
Did you ever play any of those like historic rooms, like the Rat, the Channel, I
played all of those.
Jack's? There was a Jack's too, Jumpin' Jack, Flash.
I played all those places.
You played all those places?
I also played Jack's and Cambridge. That used to be the big place when I first moved to
Didn't that burn
Cambridge.
down?
Yeah, that burned down.
What about the, I'm trying to think of some of the other rooms. In Square Men's Bar. Did you ever play there over in Inman Square, which is right down the road?
I don't think I ever played there. I played Cantones a lot.
Cantones,
was my favorite place to play was Cantones.
So was this as the Mickey Bliss combo?
Yes, yeah.
No.
Although we changed, actually it was the Mickey Bliss band because it wasn't like the organ combo stuff that I was doing at the Kirkland. It was like, rock band. We did a mix of originals and covers.
Wow. See, I didn't know that. I didn't know that much about you because the only time I ever saw you play live was on the organ, and that was a few different times at Kirkland. And I'm not sure if I ever saw you at the Cantab play the organ. I know definitely at the Kirkland. You used to open a lot of shows.
I didn't play the organ at the Cantab. I played one time. Yeah. I went over there, and I wasn't sure whether I was going to have the organ combo play because we used to play like every week at the Kirkland. So we played one time. And there was 2 people in the audience, and there were 2 guys from the other band that felt sorry for us. So I figured I was, I didn't have the seniority I had at the Kirkland. I was trying to, get in there. So I figured it'd be better just to concentrate on booking the bands and, forget about performing myself. And I think it was a wise decision.
Before I get into more booking stuff, I was just curious because you were around playing out during like a really competitive time in the Boston music scene. There were like a million bands in like the 80s or even the 70s when everything started. How different have things become from back then to now for you, the way you see how the scene has gone?
Well, it seemed to me back then it was more like just one scene. I mean, everybody knew everybody. All the bands knew each other. I mean, that's the way I saw it anyways. And there was just a couple of clubs. There was like Cantones and the Rat, and those were like the two main clubs.
Right.
A place called The Space opened.
The Space,
which was a great place, but it didn't stay open too long. I mean, there was a Channel, but that was more of a big club. People used to go there to see certain shows, but I don't think people like used to hang out there.
Right.
Like people used to go to Cantones, or at least me. I used to just go there. I didn't even know who was playing. I just, every weekend I go to the Rat, or once, maybe
because you had the Hoodoo barbecue upstairs from the Rat. I used to, when I lived in California, whenever I came home, I would just go in there, get a table and hang out, and I would see like every band in Boston walking through. I remember the first time I was there, there's John Butcher. He just went walking by, and all these people would be hanging out there. And I think a lot of the people that worked there were actually in bands too. That was the most legendary room, I think, out of all of the rooms. Were there any bands that you were a fan of? Well, there are probably a lot. Is there any that come out in the back of your mind back in the old days that you really thought were fantastic?
Yeah, and I still like them now too, like Liars, Classic Ruins, Real Kids.
You like garage rock?
Yeah.
So you used to go see those bands a lot?
Oh, yeah. Every time. Those were ones like, I'd actually, if I saw them advertised, I'd make sure I went and saw them. But like a lot of times, like I said, I just go to the Rat. I didn't even know who was playing. It's just, go there Friday and Saturday night just to see who's playing.
Storyville was across the street too, so I remember you could go back and forth and see like about 10 bands.
Yeah, that was kind of short-lived, but yeah.
That was like probably, I was going there when I was in college, so it was probably 81, 82, 83, something like that.
Yeah. Exactly.
And more bands like the Dangerous Birds and Limbo Race and November Group used to play over there, and a lot of the more garage and punk would be at the Rat, so you could get like the best of both worlds, Plus you had Lansdowne too.
Yeah. Spit.
Spit, and that became Axis, right?
I think so. Yeah.
And
that was the old Tea Party. It used to be the old Boston Tea Party at one time.
Okay, that's before my time.
Yeah.
But I did go to Spit.
Psychedelic Supermarket, too, which was even before my time.
The Psychedelic Supermarket. I've only heard about that place.
Yeah.
Was it like all rock bands?
I guess so. I was too young to go there, but it was all the big bands, the big psychedelic bands, I don't know, probably like Jeff Beck played there when he came to town. I don't know,
When you were going to see the Liars and the Real Kids and the Classic Ruins and all those bands, were any of those bands that you thought, oh, this band's going to be like huge, they're going to be like a worldly known band? I mean, did you get that vibe from them?
I didn't really think it like that because I was a punk rocker. So, soon if they got successful, then they would have sucked.
Did you know Jeff Connolly and all those guys back then?
No. In fact, they were heroes to me. That was one of the benefits of booking. I actually got to know people like Rick Hart and, Conley. I mean, when I was going to see them in the early days, that would be like going to see the Beatles or the Rolling Stones as far as I was concerned. I mean, I really looked up to them, and, they were just real icons to me.
Did you ever see like the Neighborhoods and the Outlets and bands like that?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, I don't know if I saw the Outlets down at Cantones. I saw the Neighborhoods a couple times, yeah.
God, when I think about those days, I mean, it was just such an unbelievable scene.
Oh, yeah, there was so many fantastic bands. I mean, it's just amazing.
Well, you can't say right now because we haven't done anything in over a year, but before you left, did you leave the Cantab before the pandemic?
No.
So the pandemic pretty much shut you down.
Yeah, March 13th was a Friday. And so I was working at my day job. And I come in the afternoon, I start getting a call from one band saying, well, this pandemic thing is starting to get serious. You think we should play or not? And next thing I get another band. So I decided, well, we better not take a chance and play. And then that was it. We never went back after that.
So with the owners upstairs, were they in total agreement with that decision, or did they shut down as well?
I think they got shut down afterwards because as far as me canceling the show, they didn't care because my marching orders by that time were, if they didn't think it was going to draw, it was better not to have a show.
Right, right.
So, if the bands were telling me nobody's going to come anyways, we'll play, but which some of the bands were saying, some of the bands were willing to play, but they said nobody's going to come see us.
There's always going to be somebody that's going to say the hell with it, right? I kind of went a little out of order here because I wanted to ask you how you first got into the whole booking game. Like, when did that start? Like, I know you told me 13 years at the Kirkland and 13 years at the Cantab. That's 26 years ago. Did you do something before that, or was the Kirkland like the first thing that you did?
Well, not on a regular basis, but, when I was in college, I put some shows together.
What college? Oh, Berkeley.
Well, I went there a couple of years, but I also went to UMass Amherst.
Oh.
And that's where I would put the shows together. Oh, and I forgot. Yeah, UMass Boston. We had a place called the Rock and Roll Club. And every month we used to put on shows. It was cool.
When was this about? What year?
Let's see. I graduated from that school in 1981. So I'm not 79. Between 79 and 81, I was finishing up my undergraduate degree at UMass Boston. And the cool thing was I used to be able to get a one-day liquor license from the city of Boston. So I felt like King.
King Bliss.
Yeah, because I had a liquor license. I used to put them up on the wall in my house and stuff. So we'd sell beer and wine, make a little bit of money. We got Lou Miami to play. Pastiche played there.
Oh wow!
The Count was the first band we got. He was pretty big back then. People don't realize, but the Count used to have a following.
I remember Count Viglione.
Yeah, he was one of the first guys that ever started putting out like independent records and stuff. And he was pretty big back in the day.
So you booked shows in college, and then after you did that, how did you end up with the Kirkland?
Well, I was playing in a band called the Modniks.
The Modniks?
The Modniks.
Did they ever release anything? Because I love that name.
Yeah, they put out a couple 45s.
Oh, I'd love to hear those. You have any?
Not with me. I have some, yeah.
Wow.
But
I'm a record collector. So you were playing with the Modniks.
And we had a friend in Somerville, and we were looking for gigs, and this guy says, "Oh, you should go down to the Kirkland Cafe. They're having trouble booking bands." So then the light bulb went in my head. I said to the guys, "Well, we should talk to them and see if they'll let us, book the place, and then we can get our own band to play there." So a couple of the guys, I didn't make the proposition. They went down and made the proposition to Joe Hearn, who was the owner, and he went for it. And we started out one night a week. We used to book Friday nights. He gave us Thursdays. We used to go in and rehearse on Thursdays and then book Friday nights. And I ended up with it. The other guys, got tired of it after a while and left. And I ended up doing it and booking it.
So that was 26 years ago. So that was like in the late 90s.
Like June 1993.
Oh, 93.
Yeah.
Wow. Because I actually met you. Well, I knew you from the Mickey Bliss combo because we talked on the phone.
Well, I went to your studio too and went over to your dorm room afterwards.
That's right. Wow, you have a really good memory. I wonder what we were doing in that dorm room. I'm sure it had something to do with something that you smoked or something like that.
I think we might have just been drinking alcohol. I don't know if we had any weed with us at that time, but
yeah, I was a broke college student, so yeah. Oh yeah, that's right. You did come down to Framingham State. I don't think I have any photos of that, unfortunately, because I found
they didn't have phones back then that took photos.
But I do have photos of some of the bands that were down there, like the Sex Execs and a few other bands that used to come down. The Enemy. There were Charlie Farron was down. There were a few people, but I don't have one of you. But then I went, when I worked in the music industry, I was gone, and then I came back to Massachusetts around 97, and then I met up with you. I don't know how it started, but I got in touch with you, and you ended up letting me book a night at the Kirkland, and I booked Thursday nights there.
Oh yeah,
it was a while. It went for a while. I think.
Oh yeah, those were great.
Well, there's acoustic shows,
yes,
right?
Twisted Rico. No, we called it the Club Bohemia Acoustic Review. Yeah,
and we had like about 6 different performers every Thursday, and it ended up being pretty cool.
Oh yeah, they were sad when they left. The club was. They actually go, what happened to him? Why did he leave? What did you do to him that he didn't want to stay here? I mean, it was a pretty big success.
I think what happened was I was working with the Charms, and they started getting really big, and then I got these other bands, and I couldn't.
Well, it was a combination of that, and as you might remember, when I was at the Kirkland, they didn't like to pay money, so they had me working the door and doing the sound at the same time. So you had to hire your own sound guy, to work the door, and I think you got tired of paying the sound guy. That's what you told the bartender, and then they got mad at me. They said, "We're paying you to do the sound. Why is he hiring his own sound guy?" They couldn't understand why you might not want somebody to work the door and the sound at the same time.
Your memory's impeccable, because I don't remember any of that. Yeah. I do remember it was around 2002, I think, that when I was doing that, 2002, 2003.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
I got busy. I was also booking a night at the Abbey Lounge at that time, too. So I had different nights in different places, but this is why I have to give you all the credit in the world. Booking clubs absolutely sucks, if you ask me. Yep. It's like you have to depend on people to bring fans to their shows. It's not like the Rat used to be, where people just show up. At the Kirkland, great location and everything, but people have to bring, the bands have to bring people. At that time, they did. And it didn't always work out, did it?
No. And the other thing is not only bring people, they got to bring people that drink and tip the bartenders. Because even if you get a crowd, the worst thing you can do is get a crowd that's big and that's buying a lot of drinks and not tipping, because then the bartenders go apeshit because they're working and they're not making any money.
That's all they care about, really, is alcohol sales. Yeah. Pretty much those kind of rooms. You know, some are rock rooms and they're like, we don't give a shit. We're just going to get these great touring bands, and whatever happens, people will pay to get in. Yep. But the rooms that you worked at, the two specific ones, the bar business was important. Because I remember a few times there weren't a lot of people there, but you were like, it don't matter, they're drinking a lot.
Yeah.
So I managed to get a lot of people that drank a lot to show up. And I think that's why we did pretty good with that. I don't remember the basics of what happened at the Kirkland. Maybe you can run us through that. How did that all end for you? Because you were there for 13 years.
Well, Joe Hernan was the man who owned it. And unfortunately, he died rather young. Well, to me, he was rather young. I think he was like 58. He got cancer and died. And his wife took over, but she was a nurse. She didn't really like running the business. And so then what happened is, you remember they had the big fire down at the station down in Rhode Island?
Oh, yeah, I remember. That was horrible.
Then Somerville made a law that any bar had to put in a sprinkler system. And so the sprinkler system, I think, would have cost them like $50,000 or $75,000 or something to put the sprinkler system in, which is more than she made for profit in the whole year. So she sold the business.
That's what happened.
She sold the business, and I was fortunate. One of the guys that used to play drums in the organ combo once in a while was working over at the Cantab in the Chicken Slacks, the drummer for the Chicken Slacks.
Yeah, well-known band.
He got me the gig over at the Cantab.
Oh, so did that happen immediately? Because I was going to segue to that.
Yeah, in fact, because we had a lot of lead time. There was like maybe 3 or 4 months when they told us they were going to close in May, and this guy Justin from the Chicken Slacks knew it, and he talked to Fitzy, the owner of the Cantab, and took Fitzy a while to make his mind up, though. Fitzy didn't let me know till May, and then he wanted me to start the next week. I says, Fitzy, it's going to take me a while to book the band, so I took a month off. We ended on Labor Day weekend, the Kirkland. We had a big show. It was like a big Woodstock, 3 days. Every band that we could get. We had about 45 bands that played there.
What year was that?
2007.
I was not here. I was in Arizona. I missed that.
So then the end of June, I started at the Cantab.
Wow. And then we reunited again.
Yeah.
Around 2009, you gave me a couple nights to book there. And what I liked about that room was it kind of reminded me of the Rat. Matter of fact, there was one night, I'll never forget it, there actually was a huge rat in the room. I don't know if you remember that.
Yeah.
I'm standing there at the bar, and I hear these girls go, ah! And I look, and there's a rat bigger than my cat, like sitting there. Cambridge, Cambridge is like, those are pretty big difference from, I don't know, is Kirkland considered Inman Square still?
I don't know if it's Inman Square, but it's Somerville. It's right on the borderline.
There's a big difference, though, between that neighborhood and Central Square.
Yeah, absolutely.
Central Square, even though it's Cambridge, people in other areas all think Cambridge is all, like, beautiful and everything. It is expensive. But there's a lot of rats in Cambridge. You used to go in the subway station at Central Square at night, and you'd see rats walking around on the tracks and stuff.
Oh, yeah, absolutely, yeah.
But that was kind of the appeal of the place, though, because, it wasn't a fancy sound system. You did the sound, and you had a lot of touring bands there, because you helped me out many times with bands that I couldn't get them a gig. at the Middle East or TT the Bears, and you would automatically say, yeah, they can play here, you know, and you had a lot of cool bands that were touring come through there. Did Death Valley Girls play there? I thought so.
Yes.
It was I can't believe that because they're one of the biggest bands in LA right now, and they couldn't get a gig anywhere. Somebody brought them to you? Is that how they ended up?
Yeah, Illegally Blind. I forget the fellow's name. Who he ran Illegally
A local
Blind.
promoter.
Yeah. He was over at the Middle East. I can't. I'm getting a senior moment. I can't remember his name.
It doesn't matter. I do know that there were other bands like that, bigger bands, and I'm going to ask you about that. I remember the first show that I did there was, unfortunately, it was the biggest show, I think, when I had the Caged Heat All-Star Band with Dana Colley from Morphine and Jay Thornton from Scissor Fight and Johnny Strange, man. I mean, she put together, like Chili Kurtz put together an unbelievable lineup for that show. And Milk Toast, who are really big out in Denver now. Jimmy's going to come on the show in a few weeks. They got a huge following in Denver, Colorado, where he is. And Vulgarity, I think, was the opening band. That was my biggest show. It was the first one. We had some other good ones, but that was like, I remember that show, and people really turned out for that one, without a doubt. So I know that you've seen many shows over the years, and I know this is a kind of a tough question, and I asked you this last night. I told you I was going to ask you this. Do you remember some of the greatest shows or greatest bands that stick out in your head that you were involved in, what pops out? You got some notes, so I know you get something.
These are two different questions, because the best show might not necessarily be the best band.
Let's do that first.
But the best shows, one of the ones that always strikes out is the Allstonians did a show there. It was the 30th birthday.
Was it the Cantab or Kirkland?
Kirkland.
Kirkland.
It was their 30th birthday for this guy named Tyler, their trumpet player. And for some reason, I got transported. It was almost like a Las Vegas show. I don't know. They were all wearing their suits, and they were just playing so well. And it was just such a fantastic show. And then T-Max put on a couple of shows there. He did one
from The Noise.
The Noise. When we first started, they did a big fundraiser for us.
The Noise, by the way, for listeners that aren't around here, was a big fanzine, basically, that was around for years. They're not around anymore, though, are they?
No, T's still around, but
that was a magazine. You could go into any club, anywhere in the city, or record store or whatever, and The Noise would be there. And if you got into The Noise, I got The Noise and I was happy. And, anytime I put records out, and they reviewed my comps or whatever, they were great. So he had a big show?
He had a couple of them. He did one for us because the PA system I had when I first went in there really sucked. Pardon my French. So they did a fundraiser.
People have said a lot worse than that on this show.
They did a big fundraiser so we could get some new PA equipment. I forget who the bands were other than his band. He had a band with Joel Simkiss at that time. And they were great. He had a lot of great bands. And then I remember he did a Christmas show one time. I can't remember the year it was, but his son Izzy was still young. His son Izzy was still little. He had Mick Mondo. And that was another one. Mick Mondo was pretending like he was a big superstar, but you really actually thought he was because he played so good and he looked so good. It was like being, at Boston Gardens. And two things I remember specifically about that show. I didn't play the organ combo that time, and we didn't have intermission music set up. So I was over in the corner playing my trumpet, playing Christmas carols. And Izzy was just this little kid. He didn't really like the bands all that much, but he loved me playing the Christmas carols. It was, and then the other thing was Joe used to be in with the city of Somerville then. So even though we were supposed to close at 12:30, he let us go on till 2 o'clock or so.
Nice.
And, people wouldn't let Mick off the stage. Every time we try and get off the stage, people would just call for an encore.
The Kirkland wasn't one of those rooms where there may have been, but I don't ever remember much trouble happening there.
Never had a fight.
It seemed like it was a really mellow place, and there were locals that would hang out at the bar, just like the Cantab. But it was a mellow room compared to, I used to book the Linwood when I first moved here. It wouldn't be unusual for a brawl to break out there, but you wouldn't see that at the Kirkland.
In the 14 years I was there, I only remember one fight. And, we usually handle stuff diplomatically if people would start trouble. In fact, sometimes when I was a doorman, I'm not that big of a guy, and, I used to just settle the stuff diplomatically,
So what else you got on your list over there?
Well, let me see. I was gonna say about the shows. You brought it up about your own shows. The first thing you did with that acoustic review, those shoes were great. And one of the things I really remember was Christmas Mascara playing the sitar.
Oh yeah, Chris, yeah.
And I mean those shows were fantastic.
Chris did a lot of them.
Yeah.
We had like a regular rotation of people that would come in and do acoustic sets. I remember that railing. It was really weird. There was a railing in front of the stage.
Yep.
So at first you'd look at it and be like, what's that railing doing there? But then people would put their drinks on it. You know, it's a good place for bands to put their drinks while they were playing, right?
Well, I could tell you a story about that because you were there after they remodeled. When we first went in there weren't windows there. That thing wasn't there. You could let a hand grenade off in there. You couldn't hear it outside because, it was all soundproof and everything. So then when Joe knew he was dying and his wife and his relatives didn't like the way it was, a dive bar with all the rock bands. In fact, they were going to upgrade it. They were going to make it into a piano bar. But unbeknownst to me, so I see the railing and everything. I say, what's this railing? They said, we're going to make a piano bar. He says, who's going to play the piano? They says, you are. I says, number one, I don't play piano. I play organ. It says, number two.
And you did play the organ a lot there because I remember seeing you play it.
Number two, you got to know those songs. Number three, a piano's not like an organ. You can't just let it sit there. You got to tune it and all that stuff,
Literally, how many, not literally, but actually, how many nights did you actually open the shows? Did you do it regularly?
Yeah, every Friday night.
Every Friday, the Mickey Bliss combo would play, or just you and your organ, or?
No, it was a usual combo. Usually, once in a while, we'd do a duo, but usually, more often than not, it was a trio. I preferred having a sax if I could get it, but sax players were hard to get, so it was usually a guitar player. And then sometimes, we'd have a couple of horns. We'd have the guitar, sax, trumpet, two, but normally it was a trio.
Was that it for like greatest shows or best?
Well, I got this other show
or?
over at the Cantab. Now, I didn't book this one. Martin Doyle booked it. If you might remember, Martin was booking the baseball tavern.
Yeah.
And he got thrown out of there.
He's gotten thrown out of several clubs. I can say that affectionately for my friend Martin Doyle. I'll tell you, Martin, he's very controversial, but as far as I go, we're good. Yep. Me and Martin are good. We've always been good. So he booked something down at the camp.
Oh, he was booking there for a while, but the first show he booked, he had Gangrene booked because I forget the singer.
At the Cantab?
I forget the singer's name, but he was
Chris Doherty?
Chris Doherty was getting ready to go to jail for a while.
Yeah, I remember that.
So it was a big show. So Doyle brought it over to the Cantab, and first thing that happened was he helped himself to the beers, so he got caught drinking. And Fitzy comes downstairs. You giving away the beers? Oh no, Fitzy.
Martin, you talking about?
Yeah. I says, I wouldn't give away your beers. I know that's how you make your money. So he's already off to a bad start. The first band he has on is this band called Mob Hit. And they were so goddamn loud, And Fitzy comes downstairs and says to Martin, they're too loud, you got to turn them down. And Martin, Martin says, I'm not going to turn them down. He says, he takes Fitzy outside. He says, look at the line out there. So there was such a big line, Fitzy let it go. But these bands were so loud. They
How many people do you think they got in that room? Because I remember
it was 100-room capacity, and we filled the capacity, 100-person capacity, and that was a huge show.
So they had to stop letting people in.
Yeah. So then Martin started, booking shows there for a while. He was probably, I don't know, maybe 6 or 7 months. But one of the last shows he booked, he was promising all the bands that they could. What do you call it? I guess you get free drinks. I forget what you call it.
Drink tickets?
Well, not drink tickets, but he was running a tab.
Okay.
But mostly he drank most of the beers himself. But so when it came time, some of the bands were drinking too. But when it came time to pay him, he didn't have money to pay the tab, so I took it out of the door money.
Oh, that must have went over great.
Well, he got in a fight. He attacked me. So me and him getting a fight.
He attacked you?
Me and him getting a fight in the back room, and I was about ready to whack him over the head with a mic stand, and the bouncers come in and grab me. So.
These are the kind of stories we like on the Blowing Smoke with Twister Rico podcast, brawls.
So then the manager come down and made us shake hands and everything. We go out and smoke a joint. Next day, Martin calls me up and says, did I get in a fight last night? I says, yeah.
He's a good guy.
He says,
man.
Martin, who'd you get in a fight with? I says, with me.
I like Martin.
Oh,
man.
me too. I love Martin. He was a great guy.
You got anything else on that list over there? You got quite the list.
Well,
did you write a novel?
No, but so okay. Those are the shows I remember. Now, as far as bands, I mean, when we first started out. Some of the other big shows. There were two big shows we had. One was Kenny Highland's birthday party, his 40th birthday. And what Kenny did was Kenny went and invited every band in town to play there. We even got Mr. Butch to show up, but he didn't have a set list. I mean, he didn't have like a list when people were supposed to play. So everybody shows up. Everybody's fighting about when they're going to go on. You know.
Oh my God.
It was up to me to straighten it out. But it was a great show. So then.
Putting on those big shows, I've done so many of them. They're the biggest headache in the world. When you got a back line and they still can't get everybody to this is what I meant when I said earlier.
Yeah.
It's a tough business. It's not easy booking clubs. Everyone has their own idea about everything. Everyone wants to play 11 o'clock on a Friday night. It's just a nightmare. It's not like the old days, where bands would just play whenever they were scheduled. Now it was like, we want the Hollywood slot, Well,
when I first started, everybody wanted to go on last because that was the headliner slot and that was the status. By the time I went over to the Cantab, everybody wanted to go on first because, even the young bands, because nobody stays out late anymore. But
things did change.
So then, I don't know if you know Helene Saad, who's been around for years.
Yeah, I know
the
name, yes.
So when she turned 50, she had seen Kenny's 40th birthday. So
she wanted to do her.
She
50th.
did the same thing, and that was a big show too. But that time we were a little bit more organized. We gave the band set times and everything. The reason I mentioned those two was because when I first went over to Kirkland, Kenny lived right around the street, and Helene lived over on Prospect Street, and they used to come every night, and they both had basically communes in their apartments, so they used to bring everybody from their apartment.
That helps.
And, they both also had a lot of friends, so they were a big key in my success because, they brought the people for probably the first year. So that's probably it for shows. Now, as far as bands, when we first started playing, the bands that were really good and were hitting it were like the Strange Men, Sugar Twins, X-Ray Tango was another band that did a big show. They did a record release party, and they brought in their own light shows. They had exotic dancers come in, and
these are legendary bands you're talking about. The Strange Men, they were never a dull moment with that band.
Big Ray and the Futurers were a good band, and when they did their record release party, they even had like a big rocket ship outside, outside the door, and they had food and stuff. Of course, the Charms played there a couple of times. Silver Star and the Jukebox here, Jukebox Angels. Now, some of my other favorite bands as we went on in time were like the Clydesdale Cowboys. I don't know if you know John Meadows. He's an excellent musician. I mean, Clydesdale Cowboys were a typical country band, but he had a band called The Rods where they did Rod Stewart covers.
Oh, beautiful.
He had a Deep Purple band where they did Deep Purple things. And then if you're ever at the Cantab when Diana Blue played, she used to always end the show with a Janis Joplin song. I can't remember the name of it, but Meadows one time, he's doing the Clydesdale Cowboys, and all of a sudden he does the Janis Joplin song, dead on, spot on.
Wow.
And everybody at the Cantab got a kick out of it because they were sick of hell out of the, There's a Piece of My Heart, is that the Janis Joplin song? Take a little piece of my heart. Yeah. They were sick of it, even though it's a great song, and she did it great. It was like she did it, every night, Friday and Saturday, she ended her set with it, so it was good. The Darlings were a good band. Played there all the time. Mr. Airplane.
Mr. Airplane, man.
Played a couple of times.
Love that band.
Turpentine Brothers. The Varmints is like a very underrated
Varmints,
band. With Billy Borgioli.
You really like garage rock, man.
He never got his due. I mean, he was a great songwriter, great singer, but you never hear him compared to the Liars, Real Kids. In fact, he got kicked out of the Real Kids because he wouldn't cut his hair. Back when
Speaking of hair, you have a good Real Kids haircut going on right now. It's too bad this show's not on video, but I did snap a couple photos, so we'll get that. I don't know. I would call that a 60s haircut that you got going on there.
Artie Freeman told me it's a Brian Jones haircut.
There you go, Brian Jones. Wow, well, you've given me like a lot of info, Mickey.
Yeah.
I appreciate it. So before I let you go, I want to ask you, what is like, are you going to get back in the game when things open up, or are you done with the game?
I have no idea, Steve. I mean, one of the things like you were talking about was the alcohol thing. I mean, I did it for 26 years, but I'm sick of being an alcohol salesman. You know what I mean? But I don't know what other kind of business model there is. I mean, ideally, if I could do it, I'd like to open a little health food restaurant that had entertainment. But, the thing about the restaurant business is even that, to really make it, most businesses, you got to sell alcohol. I mean, most restaurants, they don't make their money selling food. It's a lost leader. They make their money, selling alcohol and maybe coffee and tea.
The model that we got going on here could work. There's an art studio.
Yep.
You could have bands play in the studio. You could have an art show going on, and you can get a beer company to come down and sponsor it or whatever. I think that's going to be the future for a lot of things, because all the clubs are closed down.
Yep.
They're not just going to reopen. I mean, it's going to take a long time for us to get through this mess.
Yeah.
But you know what? Whatever you end up doing, Mickey, I'm sure it's going to be... You're a lawyer too, right? I'm allowed to say that, right?
Well, I still have a license to practice law, but I haven't really practiced too much in the 21st century.
Probably better off.
Yeah.
It's better for your reputation when you're not. I did,
And
maybe
things
I
have gotten
should've-
so technological. I don't really think I could. I mean, I don't know if I could anymore.
Yeah,
I don't have any desire to. That's one.
Most
thing.
people probably don't even know that. I probably let something out of the bag.
No, a lot of people know that, but.
Well, thank you for coming on, man.
Oh, my pleasure, Steve.
Really good
My
to
pleasure.
see you, and maybe down the road we can do this again too.
Anytime, Steve. You just give me a call.
Cool. All right. Well, we have an amazing lineup of guests coming on the podcast in weeks to come. Ruthie Morris, the guitar player of the Atlanta, Georgia band Magnapop, one of my favorite bands ever, is going to be here. Portsmouth, New Hampshire legend Jeff Palmer, a.k.a. Jeff Useless, who has played in a bunch of outstanding bands like The Connection, The Queers, The Guts, and most recently put out some solo stuff and a great album with Lucy Ellis. Curtis Casella from Tang Records. I know a lot of people are really looking forward to that one. He's the guy that helped launch the careers of bands like the Lemonheads, Mighty Mighty Boss Tones, Bullet LeVolt, Gangrene. He's going to be on the show. Bob Mayo, from one of Boston's hugest metal bands, Wargasm, will be here to talk about a lot of controversy that he went through with his record labels. And James McAndrew, started playing music here in Boston, but now resides in Denver, Colorado, with his fantastic band, Milk Toast and Company, which is all new members, by the way. But they put out a new single recently called Cigarette Burns, and it's blowing up on Spotify, and the video is fantastic. I highly recommend you check that out. And, also every Friday we're going to be releasing a Twisted Rico radio show, which is on all the same platforms as this podcast. Thanks again to Mickey Bliss for leaving his beach house and coming down to the studio today. And as always, thank you to our engineer, Nick Z, here at New Alliance East in Somerville. Please check out the Patreon page, where if you want to, you can support this podcast for as little as $1 a month. It's patreon.com/Twisted Rico. And you can always reach me at twistedrico@gmail.com, at Twisted Rico on Instagram. And also there's a new Blowing Smoke Instagram page, at Blowing Smoke with TR. And there's also Facebook and Twitter pages. We're everywhere. Till the next time we say goodbye, this is Blowing Smoke with Twisted Rico. I'm your host, Steve Ricardo. Keep the rock and roll alive.